Right, for the postmodern view on youth culture, very famously, Lyotard is going to say that meta-narratives are in decline. But he would also say that there's been a victory of capitalism over the predictions of Marxism, and that is essentially where we come from a postmodern perspective. This idea that the Marxist prediction of revolution, of class consciousness and an awakening to overthrow capitalism has gone. And what has happened is you, as young people, have embraced capitalism in a way that nobody really could have potentially predicted. Now, essentially, when we look at postmodernism, we are looking at individualism, we are looking at fragmentation, and we are looking at the most contemporary social theory. So when it comes to the study of youth cultures, postmodernism is it will be the most up-to-date one. Now, when we look at capitalism winning over the predictions of Marxism, we see a growth of individualism. And postmodernism is very much about individual emotions and responses, and not essentially combining that with any structural reasoning for that behaviour. It's just how you feel at the time. Now, for a postmodernist, we live in a society which has been increasingly fragmented. The differences that you get and the differences that we would have had 150 years ago are vast. 150 years ago, everybody in the school that you are in would be the same gender, would be the same social class background, would live in the same area, would wear the same clothes, would be English, would be Christian, would be white, would be indistinguishable from anybody else. Whereas now society is fragmented and pulled apart. You are in education with people from a wide variety of different backgrounds, and you can't really distinguish between the people who might have two parents who are doctors and are ostensibly middle class, and two people who are working class parents. You couldn't tell the difference in the clothes and the things that were available for them. So there's this fragmented society, and we see it fragmented with cultural diversity, with a mix of different backgrounds, with a hybridity that we see in society. So the normal lines and the normal differences that we had 150 years ago are gone. This society has broken up. This society has fragmented. And now everything is based on individualism and consumer choices. And that is what youth culture is principally about. It is about your identity, and it is about you buying what you want. Basically, material goods that you find interesting or that you want to associate yourself with. You don't need now to have a particular background of this is the style that I want. Your style and your choices can be entirely random, entirely meaningless, entirely incoherent, and can just be based off what you think is cool at the particular time. Now, this all culminates together in Bennett's idea that we don't have subcultures anymore, that they are a thing of a past, that they're dead and buried. If, let's say, you were a skinhead, right? You would need to be white, you would need to be working class, you would need to be usually male, you would need to have some Doc Martens or some bother boots, some working boots, you need your Ben Sherman shirt, your tight jeans, your braces. You would have to have those consumer choices, and they would be within a very set group from a very set background. But that doesn't need to happen anymore. You might own some Doc Martens now, but it doesn't mean that you're a skinhead. You don't have to subscribe to that way of thinking. You can have an entire skinhead kind of outfit, but you're not a racist and you don't have a working class background. This is because society is fragmented. So what we have now, instead of subcultures where you are stuck within them for a long period of time, everybody within that subculture sharing the same background, ethnicity perhaps, gender perhaps, and norms and values, you are in neo-tribes. These are quick, loose groupings where age, your class, your age, your gender, your ethnicity are completely irrelevant. Within this neo-tribe, all that matters is your consumer choices that marry up with the other members for that one particular moment. Now, ravers is a great example, and will be the one that you will use in your exam, studied by Sarah Thornton, of a modern neo-tribe. You know, the people would go to the club, they're from a range of backgrounds, but there are some consumer choices that bring them together. Those consumer choices would be drugs and music. So they would subscribe to the same kind of music style, and they would usually subscribe to ecstasy being their particular drug of choice. And even though it's illegal, it is a consumer choice to buy that. So ravers are a good example. You might see cosplay as a good example of a neo-tribe now. You will get together for one particular event, you dress up as a comic book character or whatever it may be, and then home you go, and you're back to your either working class neighbourhood or your middle class neighbourhood, and your background is entirely removed from those people who you went to that cosplay event or that convention with. So these are examples of neo-tribes, loose groupings, share the same consumer choice, but just at that moment. And what has been able to shape your consumer choices is globalization. The fact that the world has got more interconnected because of media, almost got smaller. You know what's going on now around the world, and you're kind of not forced, but you can kind of engage with different cultural styles and different cultural backgrounds. You know what is happening in America, you know what is happening in Australia, you know what's happening in India, and you can relate to some of these people more closely, and you're able to then pick and choose your style around that. Now, you know, a lot of people have got tattoos that are like Maori tattoos from, indigenous or Aboriginal people, but there's no meaning behind that. For some groups, these tattoos are very, very significant and important, but for you, you just go, I think that looks cool. You might have writing in a different language that you can't speak as a tattoo. Lots of people have got that. Well, why? What's the meaning to that? Well, it doesn't matter that that you can't speak the language, or you're not sure what it says, or you couldn't write it out yourself. You think that this looks cool. And obviously, globalization has shaped that, because you are now more attuned to the wider world, and you can see and have more contact with different kinds of styles. You don't need to have any meaning to it, you just like it. Of course, for Willis, we would say that we don't want to live in this world where you want a label anymore. People say, don't label me. I'm not part of this group, I'm my own person. And therefore, it's all about creating your individual identity. You don't want to be just, I'm in this group. I don't want to be just a member of the punks. I am my own person. And we can see in music, in fashion, that this fragmentation has occurred as well. What is a person who likes punk anymore? Well, there's so many different branches. Are you a rocker? Well, yeah, but what type of rock? There's loads and loads of rock. I think my good example is look at the Kings of Leon. If you listen to the Kings of Leon's first album, it sounds very, very different to the Kings of Leon's latest album. And if you look at their fashion, they're an example, I think, of a postmodern band who completely changed their style and identity as they go from the first album to the final album. You can shift and you can change. So this is the postmodern idea. Okay. Obviously, there's a lot of talk here about consumerism, a lot of easy comparisons to make between Marxism. When we look at the purpose of youth culture, it's all about identity. And again, we're looking at a different group now. We're looking at neo-tribes, whereas the Marxists looked at subcultures, whereas the functionalists looked at youth culture as a whole, whereas our feminists are looking at female youth cultures. We are looking at neo-tribes now. Cage is irrelevant. We've got globalization here, we've got consumerism here, we've got lots and lots of elements to discuss. And a lot of writers, but there's plenty to say for the postmodern perspective. And again, remember that this works well in almost any essay, because if you get essays that are on sociological theories in youth culture, then you must compare it to postmodernism and their ideas here of neo-tribes and consumerism. But also, if you get a question on class, gender, ethnicity, well, for a postmodernist, Cage is completely irrelevant in a neo-tribe. So consequently, it works very well as a comparison there also. You have to get to grips with this one because it's a really, really useful kind of multi-purpose theory in a youth culture setting.